Today, with two different operations, but the same strategy, Ukraine has destroyed Russian assets worth more than $3 billion. Firstly, they turned the fortified Feodosia naval port in Crimea into a death trap by mixing land, air, and naval power with electronic warfare. Secondly, they reached Moscow's doorstep and struck Russia's economy by destroying a major oil pipeline. What is the total amount of damage from these two operations? And how did Ukraine make this impossible feat possible? Let's look at the details. At 5:47 a.m., the relative quiet of Feodosia Naval Harbour was shattered by a sudden and violent Russian preemptive strike. The operation was initiated by a combined force of Russian assets. Project 2, 1631 Boyan-M corvettes, each valued at approximately $60 million, and MiG-31 interceptors, with a unit cost of around $40 million. These platforms launched a coordinated volley of 3 M14 caliber cruise missiles, priced at over $1 million per unit, alongside heavy fire from Kashtan close-in weapon systems, which can expend upwards of $500,000 in ammunition per engagement. The target was a concentration of Ukrainian forward raiding craft. The strategic objective was clear: to neutralize a perceived threat to Crimea's critical oil and naval logistics hub and disrupt Ukraine's growing operational reach in the Black Sea. The Ukrainian counterattack was a multi-layered operation that began almost instantly. The first element involved Su-27 jets, creating an electromagnetic screen with radar decoys to blind Russian coastal defenses. This action enabled several simultaneous assaults. Scalp cruise missiles were fired at high-value Russian command and fire control centers, while a fleet of UJ-22 drones maintained a persistent watch over the area. In the naval domain, Gyoza MM-class boats breached minefields by electronically jamming their detonation mechanisms. With the corridors cleared and the Russian crews preoccupied by the aerial decoys, Ukraine's RK-360 MC Neptune missile systems then targeted the exposed corvettes. The operational design was a cascade of interlocking actions. The decoys drew radar attention away from the real threats. The drones identified gaps in the disrupted defenses. The cruise missiles decapitated command and control, and the small, fast naval craft exploited the resulting chaos. In under 10 minutes, the tactical initiative had decisively swung from Russia to Ukraine, transforming a defensive reaction into a relentless multi-domain assault. With the Russian radar network still reeling and blinded from the initial Neptune missile strikes, the next phase of the harbour assault commenced. A new wave of unmanned surface vessels, USVs, advanced from less than 2 miles away. These low-profile craft navigated the dark, turbulent water, guided by a continuous data stream from the drone umbrella above. Their compact jet drives created a minimal wake, enabling them to slip through the gaps in Feodosia's mine belts that had been cleared just moments before. Each USV was armed with precision-shaped charges, intentionally designed not to sink the targets, but to disable their propulsion and compromise hull integrity. This tactic ensured the damaged ships could not be towed to repair yards, effectively turning them into long-term obstructions within the harbour. Inside the breakwater, the surviving Boyan-M corvettes, already damaged by Neptune strikes, attempted a defense with their Kashtan close-in weapon systems. Their efforts were significantly hampered because their tracking radars were still compromised by the electromagnetic interference left by Su-27 decoys. As a result, Kashtan's 30mm cannons were seen firing erratically into the water, failing to track the approaching unmanned surface vehicles. These nimble USVs then successfully closed the distance, striking the corvette's hulls and propeller shafts, which resulted in a sequence of massive fireballs that lit up the smoke-filled anchorage. In a desperate countermeasure, Russian commanders attempted to deploy unmanned underwater vehicles, UUVs, for emergency mine clearance. However, Ukrainian EW nodes mounted on fast assault craft jammed their guidance signals, effectively freezing them in the water. Attempts to reposition MiG-31 air cover only compounded the confusion, as UJ-22 drones continued to feed false radar echoes, drawing the interceptors away from the primary engagement zone. The result was a cascading series of detonations as fuel slicks ignited and pier-side infrastructure, including cranes, collapsed. Amid the chaos, Ukrainian Gursa-M gunboats maintained a standoff position, directing follow-up USV runs. Within 15 minutes, Feodosia's outer harbour was transformed into a kill zone of wrecked steel and burning fuel, confirming that the initiative seized offshore now translated into complete control of the sea approaches. Building on this success, Ukrainian air elements shifted their focus, exploiting the radar gaps to target the port's strategic infrastructure. Su-27 squadrons, synchronized with standoff Scalp cruise missile launches, targeted oil depots, fuel storage tanks, and reinforced command bunkers. The ensuing explosions severed electricity and communication links across the naval base. This aerial assault triggered a fierce but disorganized Russian response. From inland positions, Russian batteries launched Kaliber cruise missiles towards suspected Ukrainian positions. On the water, surviving naval crews tried to tow damaged vessels to safety, while their Kashtan CIWs provided defensive fire. However, Ukraine's persistent surveillance and electronic warfare network was the decisive factor. The UJ-22 drone network continuously shifted communication frequencies to evade Russian tracking, while simultaneously mapping the trajectories of incoming Kaliber missiles. This targeting data was relayed to counter-fire units, and the drone's jamming capabilities forced many Russian missiles to lose their lock, causing them to veer off course and into the sea. With the Russian counterattack blunted, Ukrainian forces moved to completely lock down the harbour. Gyurza-M gunboats and USVs sealed every exit, while Neptune missile systems loitered offshore, ready to engage any vessel that attempted to break out. Amphibious assault teams, supported by micro-robots to detect mines, began systematically clearing the piers, disabling remaining weapon systems and communication nodes. In a move demonstrating operational discipline, embedded medics provided aid to wounded Russian sailors. The final phase of the operation was aimed at crippling Feodosia's logistical infrastructure. Guided by live imagery from drones, Scalp missiles hit critical targets, including fuel depots, railway junctions, and submarine pens. The massive secondary explosions that followed guaranteed that Russian resupply lines through the Black Sea would be severed for weeks. As dawn broke, Ukrainian flags were visible over key command towers, where engineers had already begun the work of assessing the damage. But the story doesn't end there. Hours earlier, another high-stakes operation was unfolding deep inside Russia, targeting the nation's economic and military lifeblood. At 2:17 a.m., approximately 70 miles south of Moscow, a thick fog enveloped a critical section of the Tula-Moscow oil pipeline, a strategic asset valued at over $3 billion. 6 Russian K-52 Alligator attack helicopters emerged from the low cloud cover, firing unguided S-8 rockets at what their intelligence had assessed to be a Ukrainian reconnaissance team. They were, in fact, targeting sensor decoys. This was the opening salvo in a complex operation aimed at severing a primary fuel artery for Russia's western front. The Ukrainian plan commenced not with a direct strike, but with an act of elaborate deception. At 3:05 a.m., a formation of Mugin 5 decoy drones, crude but effective plywood airframes with loud rotors, was launched high above the Tula corridor. They were designed to be slow, noisy, and obvious, presenting unmissable targets for Russian air defense radar. As anticipated, Pantsir S-1 air defense units immediately locked onto the decoys. While Russian attention was focused on the sky, the real operation was proceeding in silence on the ground. Along a quiet 6-mile stretch, low-slung Ukrainian mining robots crept through pipeline access channels, planting directional charges and smart mines at reinforced junctions. Simultaneously, in the forests west of Serpukhov, Vilka-M rocket launchers, escorted by robotic logistics units, maneuvered into pre-plotted firing positions along remote forest roads. With the electronic and subterranean elements in place, the ground phase began. At 4:10 a.m., as the fog began to lift, a spearhead of T-84 main battle tanks, flanked by BTR-4E infantry carriers, advanced on Checkpoint 22, a hardened Russian outpost guarding a critical pipeline pressure segment. This was a feint. As the tanks engaged the outpost's defenders, drawing their fire, Ukrainian motorized infantry teams on light, modified motorcycles slipped into the tree line. They executed a wide flanking maneuver through an abandoned industrial area, arriving at a camouflaged logistics depot. By 4:40 a.m., they had breached the facility, planted thermite charges, and neutralized the garrison, severing the local Russian resupply line before its commanders were aware of the attack. The Russian counterattack came at 5:02 a.m. A salvo of 300 mm cluster munitions from a BM-30 Smerch multiple-launch rocket system saturated the area, while Lancet III loitering munitions hunted for Ukrainian armor. The battlefield became a chaotic mix of explosions and shrapnel, but Ukrainian forces held their ground, having successfully established a corridor around the pipeline. At 5:45 a.m., the battle escalated into the air. Two Ukrainian MiG-29 fighters, acting as decoys, flew low and fast with afterburners engaged, immediately drawing the attention of Russian S-400 air defense batteries and Nebo-M tracking arrays. As Russian interceptors scrambled, a pair of Ukrainian Su-30 multi-role fighters, flying nap of the earth at just 200 feet, moved in undetected. Armed with Ki-31P anti-radiation missiles, they locked onto the emissions of two forward Nebo-M radar arrays, destroying them moments later. The S-400 systems reacted, launching 9 M96 interceptor missiles. However, a Ukrainian Bukovel electronic warfare vehicle activated, flooding the area with GPS noise and radar spoofing signals. The S-400 tracking data faltered. In a daring maneuver, one of the decoy MiG-29S executed a sudden dive, dropping flares and disappearing below the radar horizon, causing the incoming interceptor missile to miss. This created a temporary but critical breach in Russia's air defense shield. Through this breach, a wave of FPV drones surged forward, no longer tracked by radar, and headed directly for the pipeline. The final act was executed with surgical precision. At 6:02 a.m., from a disguised panel van positioned miles away, two Rybak fiber optic guided drones were launched. The first served as a final decoy, drawing fire toward a secondary fuel depot. 30 seconds later, the second drone launched. Tethered by a hair-thin fiber optic line, it was guided by an operator watching a thermal feed. At 6:07 a.m., the drone reached its target, a vulnerable junction where two high-pressure pipeline arms met. The operator guided it down to 20 feet and initiated the impact. The drone's 2-pound-shaped charge detonated dead center. The result was instantaneous. High-pressure fuel aerosolized and ignited, creating a 300-foot fireball that lit up the dawn sky. The shockwave ruptured over 600 feet of pipeline, creating a torrent of fire. Within minutes, Russia dispatched elements of the 76th VDV Airborne Brigade to secure the breach, but as they advanced at 6:35 a.m., a pre-planted Ukrainian mine detonated, destroying a bridge and cutting off their retreat. Trapped between Ukrainian infantry and the burning pipeline, the VDV were caught in a kill zone, targeted by suicide drones and mortar fire. While their communications were jammed, Ukrainian forces did not press for annihilation. Instead, they held the perimeter, signaling that the ground was off limits. By 7:20 a.m., with the VDV pinned and the fire still raging, Ukrainian units began a coordinated withdrawal. Their mission was not to hold territory, but to inflict maximum logistical damage and control the operational clock. Delayed action mines were deployed along likely Russian approach routes. In a final act of battlefield discipline, a Ukrainian medic team rendered aid to wounded Russian soldiers before melting back into the fog. Overhead, a high-altitude NATO reconnaissance drone confirmed the mission's success. The operation was concluded. A vital logistical artery, valued at $3 billion, had been severed. This created immediate fuel shortages that stalled Russian tank battalions and held up supply convoys for more than 72 hours. The strike represented a new level of sophisticated, long-range asymmetric warfare, successfully blending deception, multi-domain coordination, and precision strikes with tactical discipline.